Hello, hello, hello. We are live. I believe we're live. I see people in the chat already. This is VeeFriends making comics now. I'm DJ,
My name is Jim Rugg.
and today we don't really have an agenda, but I think we've cooked up some fun stuff to talk about the VeeFriends comics we've been putting out, where we're at. Last week we did our comic summit, our third one with Gary. 2 days, 2 full days talking comics, new story ideas. He didn't want to review anything in the past, right, Jim? He was like, new things only. um, Not a lot of strategy work. It was just like, what comes next, you know, how we're doing things. Yeah, it's been a little bit. I was
It
on
has.
vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say it has been a little bit, DJ. It's been, I think, 4 weeks since the last live episode. So, yeah, fill us in. What were you about to say? Because you weren't here for that last live episode, but we did manage to get through it sort of okay.
Yeah. I wasn't here for the last episode. That was Nick Selleck, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we were supposed to be dropping issue 18, which was Shell's Kitchen. We were all ready to drop that. This is fun because it's like a where we were, what happened. Like Shell's Kitchen, we noticed when we were doing QA, quality control of that issue, we noticed some like minor ghosting again on like what was going on with issue 16. I'm missing 16's cover here. What's going on, DJ? And so we held that to go back to get rebagged and solve those solutions. It's like a science lab. Like we got to go back, figure out what's going on because we don't want to put out, especially a blind product where you might know what's inside. That would not be a great blind product. So they made the decision. I went on vacation. Gary very much encouraged me. It's like the only boss I've ever had encourage me to take a break because I usually don't go on vacation, Jim. I usually just, you know how it is. Like comic artists work nonstop and I'm in it. And he's like, hey, take a trip. So my wife and I went to Ireland. We did that. Met some VeeFriends folks over there too. I should have put together some pictures. Maybe I'll drop them in later if you're chatting. Ireland was wonderful, but while I was over there, the decisions were made. I didn't even know any of this was really going on with the production issues, and we also have changed our production suppliers around. I think that was announced, so that's why there's a small pause in the summertime, but that's okay because VeeFriends has a lot of stuff coming out, a lot of things going on that you've seen. As a matter of fact, where's my camera here? This just came in the mail. The Bose speaker collaboration we did. This kind of surprised everybody. I've known about this since last fall. This is also a blind box. It's not been opened. So I'm going to open it here live, I think. Rare Robots Rare. I want to get that one. I bought this myself. You know, my wife bought one too. We're like on these live streams, Jim. We can't control ourselves. Like
it's hilarious.
We need to do a better job of not doing that. But you know, we want to support the brand, but we also want some cool radios. So I'm gonna open this while we're chatting. And
it's part of the experience, though. It's good to participate, to see it from a fan point of view.
Yeah, I see Steve's in the chat from Ireland. We had a meetup over there. He actually gave me, you can't see it, but it's up there on my wall. It's a wood carving of my Scully character from the Draw or Die Club.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I think I'm gonna actually, you know what? I have it on Velcro so I can take it off. There we go. I knew I'd do that. Yeah, he hand carved that for me. Awesome. While my camera's shaking, sorry. And then he usually does these with VeeFriends. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. He usually carves two, one to give away and one to keep for himself. He doesn't sell them. It's just like a cool thing that he does. So really appreciate that, Steve. And it's like being my life forever. But yeah, so we did our last summit last week for 2 days. Came up with, and I'm going to show this on the screen here. Like 1 second, I'm going to jump around a little bit. It's going to be a little ADHD action happening here. We got a lot to talk about. With talent search too, if there's people watching, we'll get to that too. At our summits, we usually have this open. These are the blank story sheets, really. Now, I've blurred this out on purpose so you can't see, but at our last summit, it ends up looking like this when we're done. So each one of these blocks, look at that, how blurry it is. Haha, suckers, you can't see what's coming. these are the amount that are ready to produce, and Jim and I are actually hiring for right now. So we're getting some writers, we're getting some talent on these books. That's how many? 1, 2, 3, that's 5, 10, 15, 16, 17 issues are in the works right now. And then a couple of them, like we'll say, oh, they still need work. So we were brainstorming them, but we're like, not quite there yet. And maybe we'll demo live with the chat, kind of how that works. I'll throw out an idea. Maybe we'll just brainstorm it out a little bit, and we'll get into that. But first, I'm going to open up this. Let's see what we got, and then we'll talk about the takeaways from the thing.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. I don't want a swaggy. I'm probably going to get a swaggy. I'm fine with flexing Fox. That's my second. My second favorite VeeFriend.
And the artwork on these DJ, is this all Chris?
This is Chris Faison. Yep. I was originally going to do it when we did these. There's a little behind the scenes of the Bose speaker project here. They told us, yeah, you could do all over print, but they were worried. They were like, well, you might not want to print, like just print up here. And I was like, let's try it. Like, Chris, just make it big and bold. And then I wrote like the turn it up, and like I was originally supposed to draw them, but I just didn't have time. So I was like, Chris, you want to jam this out? Chris is for those that know, for those that don't know, Chris is a machine internally. So I think he drew the 3 speaker designs within a day or so of going back and forth. So yeah, I love the Fox. I'm good with this one.
Yeah, it looks really good. I like the all over printing as well. Much better choice to do something big and bold rather than just like in the top.
Yeah, Bose is awesome to work with. This is a great speaker. And I guess I didn't even know this, but if you have 2 of them, which my wife got one, so she's probably going to steal this one so that it's a left and right speaker. It goes into like party mode. They're just really good speakers. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll just flip it on eBay because I don't know what these are going for. But everybody that ordered one on the stream last Friday, these are starting to show up today. So those are very nice. And then
that's awesome. I use Bose earbuds.
Yeah,
very happy with those. So I'm sure their speakers are just as good.
Yeah. So the summit. Any takeaways, Jim, from that? Like, describe that in your words.
Yeah.
How those go.
Okay, so this is my second summit. We probably talked about this a little bit, but before I started working for VeeFriends, I went to a summit. And I kind of treated it as like an artist retreat, right? It's going to be it was the whole art comics team from VeeFriends, as well as Gary, the president, a couple of other people that are part of VeeFriends. But I was looking at it the first time as this is a chance for just a bunch of cartoonists to sit in a room and have fun making up stories. And it was great. It's what led me to join VeeFriends. So this one was kind of the same flavor. It's been, I think that was August, maybe last year or something. It's been a while since we had a chance to get the whole team together in one of these. So everybody is coming from all over the country. We meet at, we'll get like an Airbnb or something. So everybody's contained in the same house. We work in the mornings, we work in the afternoons, we eat together, we work in the evening. And it's really great. It's like I said, I compare it to artist residencies that I've participated in, where you have a bunch of artists in the same room, kind of brainstorming and improvising and telling stories and making things up as we go along. And of course, Gary leads this. Very high energy, as I'm sure everybody watching this knows Gary. They've seen his videos, they've seen him talk. He's definitely got a full charge battery on his back. And that's kind of it. We drove there this time. It wasn't real far for us. So it was kind of surreal for me because I had just finished Heroes Con in Charlotte. And I talked about that on Making Comics Now leading up to it. But that's my biggest show of the year. It's a 3-day show in Charlotte. I drive there. So it's about an 8-hour drive, work all weekend. It's the fastest that time passes, although the offsite was also a very fast time passing kind of event.
Yeah.
And then I drove home on Monday. I was home for 12 hours, hopped in the car. I think I got up at 4 a.m., picked you up, DJ, and off we went. We get there at, 9:30 or 10. That's about whenever things are starting in the morning.
Yep.
And pretty much hit the ground running. Like you said, Gary, this, I think in the past, you guys have done 3 or 4 day offsites. This was going to be 2 days, which meant no time to fool around. And, Gary wanted to just work on new stories, which was great. We definitely needed that. And we pretty much hit the ground running, not a lot of recap. It was as everybody came in from their different locations around the country.
Yeah.
It was like, grab your coffee and let's go start working. The weather was beautiful, so we did work outside a bunch, which is really nice. And like I said, it's a lot of what I would think of as improv. Everybody, well, some of you probably know I'm a big wrestling fan, so I listen to wrestling podcasts, and you often hear people talking about working for Vince McMahon or working for WWF as part of their writers team. And there's a lot of, this is what we're doing. And then there's the, what if we did this? So there's a lot of that goes on, a lot of maybe having part of a story, having a scene, having a real strong grasp of a character, coming in with different elements. And then if it's not fully formed, let's start adding to it. Let's start working on it. Let's see what pops the audience, right? Because like we've got about 8 or 9 people sitting around a table, and you can kind of tell whenever these ideas are clicking, because there's a more of an electric energy around that table. People are responding, they're throwing in their 2 cents, and you can kind of like really tell when something is clicking, so to speak.
Yeah, and sometimes it's reactionary too, because Gary will watch the reactions. He likes to watch people's body language and like the faces that they make. And he'll know like, oh, this is it. Even if it's like a shocking, like if the girls gasp or someone gasps and goes, no, we can't do that. He's like, oh, this is causing some attention, But yeah, it's a really fast paced process, but it also doesn't really feel like that while you're in it. It feels kind of like you're doing a lot of thinking. And I'll just say, like, when we were done, it did kind of feel like your brain is just kind of like, on our drive home, it was like we were doing a lot of talking about it. And it just kind of feels like, wow, we just ingested a lot of information. Like to come up with 17 different stories or more, I think it was probably 20 total, and start like working on those and actually making them good. Like Gary doesn't want them to just be good. Like he wants to go like, if they're just good, we turn them like a different color. I'll show that in a second. But it'll be like orange or yellow or something like that. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to that idea again when it's fully like flesh it out, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time for an idea to really cook. Rare Robot was like that. The Rare Robot comic book we talked about at Summit #1 in March of 2025. And it kind of just said, let's hang out on this. We knew we wanted it to be in the future. We knew all of that stuff, but he was like, this one isn't a priority right now. Let's just hold it. And then in August, it just kind of came out. And I'm glad we waited, because Gary had a different, whatever piece was missing in that story puzzle kind of clicked. And then it was like, oh, this makes sense. And then Adam Slips came about. Like all that stuff kind of comes out of those fast paced where you think something's a joke and he's like, I'm not joking. Like it's Adam Slips, in the story.
It's also, I think it's worth noting, a lot of people, a common question people will have in interviews is, where do ideas come from? And what you're describing with Rare Robot DJ, where it's like, we've got these ideas, but it just isn't all together. We're missing some piece. I think that happens, that's fairly common, unless you're really under a deadline where you don't have that luxury to sort of be like, okay, let's work on this other thing. A lot of creators will work on multiple projects at once for this very reason, where they'll work for a while in one direction. If they hit a sticking point or some area where they're not sure what comes next, it's very productive to have something else kind of that you can turn to. So you're not sitting around being unproductive and all the negative feelings that can bring up. Instead, it's like, that idea can sit. We've got some work done on it. We have some things we're sure about or we like, and we'll come back to it, which is great to have that luxury. We're going to talk a lot about this process, a lot of which you developed here. And I think it's very positive for those reasons, because it does allow us to move around. Ideas are such a strange thing that, you almost sometimes have to see them out of the peripheral vision, as opposed to, I'm just so focused on this thing, I need it to work. And it's not always how ideas come up. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of try to put yourself in a position to receive ideas. I think you can look at this stuff at night, and we did this one night on the offsite, which was, hey, we've been working on this character. Let's go over it one more time. And then everybody, maybe you'll dream up a solution or the missing piece. And I'm an advocate for all of that. I don't think there's one way that you can get ideas, but I do think you can put yourself in a position to be ready for them as they come up. And that's what a lot of this kind of offset and what this process highlights.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, I think we should just do it live for just a second because I have a story nugget. I'll just
Okay.
call it like a story nugget, a story idea, a story concept, because what we'll do, and I can't show the main board because it'll give away way too much stuff. So I've kind of tried to replicate a little bit of it. Um, Gary will have a list in his mind. Actually, he comes to every summit. He already has a note. Like, I think within the first 5 minutes, he pulls out his phone and he's like, okay, we need to talk about this summit. We definitely need to talk about these three. And I'm taking notes in the Miro board. And then when May comes, like she's taking us, like we have three different people taking notes pretty much. Because it can switch, like my computer, that was great this time having Jim working the Miro board too and everyone else working it. They've watched me do it enough that like it's a pretty fast paced process. You'll see in a sec. Like as ideas are coming out, we're going, throw that away, throw this away. That one's good. This one's good. That's locked. Like that should be a locked thing. And it can be really fast paced. I only designed this process for that because I was like, it goes so fast, and Gary's mind works a little quicker than most, I think, because like you might have to like pause and think about something, but he's already like 3 steps ahead as far as like what he wants to talk about next. So we might jump from this board to that board, right? So let's just role play here. We've sat down. Gary's given us a list, and he might throw out to the group. He has his own idea that he's holding a second, and he'll say like humble hedgehog, and he'll say any thoughts, and he'll just open it up to the entire group. So the chat, if you're watching this, 16 folks, you can put your ideas, what you think. Humble hedgehog, our dear humble hedgehog. We might actually look at, I might go to the website while we're talking here. I have an idea in my mind. I might wait for everyone else to go and give their idea. Or if it's a really good idea, sometimes it could feel like not a competition, but more like hey, let me propose my idea. And then your idea might get tanked. So you got to kind of have to also, like Jim said, like keep an open mind and release yourself from what you thought was like the story that you wanted to tell. So I'm just going to take this and kind of just be open to the story developing on its own, right? So I'm going to just put.
And it was pretty common too, as we would go through this. Like I said, there's 8 or 9 of us sitting around working on it. We would throw out questions about where do hedgehogs live? What do they eat? What eats them? Kind of like a nonfiction, basically research on, does the animal help? Does the location help? Is there something in there that we can pull? Which again is not different than almost any other writing process that I've been involved with, but it's kind of fun in a group. It does make me think of improv, Upright Citizens Brigade, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because as you said, everybody is kind of throwing things out there, and you kind of roll with it. If a better idea shows up, then that becomes the leaderboard, and you start building around it.
I'm grabbing one more thing here while we talk because I've got an idea I want to kind of express for this one. I got to find issue 3, which was World Tour, we called it. And I got to go find maybe the last page with the road signs. If you know VeeFriends Comics, there's a world and there's these road signs. I've been putting them in since I was doing comic strips, just because we've got the locations of V World. And one of the first tasks I was given when I was doing comic strips here, I'm going to paste it in here right now so you can see. Because sometimes I'll have the visual all set up just for, why is it not coming? Oh, here it comes. I'll have the visual set up so that like the rest of the team can maybe see it, so that it kind of might spark something. But these are locations inside of V World, right? And again, I was given a folder with these. I didn't understand what they were. They were NFT backgrounds. They were like scenes that could be swapped on things and all that stuff. And try to the challenge was baking them into a world somehow. So in order to do that, as we were telling the stories, where I would even be like, "Oh, the dangerous desert's this way," like a very Looney Tunes-esque road signs, so you don't get lost. So my idea that I've had quietly, I've had this idea because you spend a lot of times when you're working on comics, especially with the comic strips. When I was doing that, and I'd have ideas for my. This is not canon, by the way, until Gary says it is. But my idea for Humble Hedgehog was he's the guy in V World who's painting these damn signs and going around and putting them up in the middle of the night because his motivation is he doesn't want people to get lost there. And he's just doing it. They're like, wow, these signs are so helpful, but he never takes credit for it. So I might pull open. You see, I just pulled open a notepad there, and I'm just gonna go Humble Hedgehog. And what else might he be responsible for? Like Humble Hedgehog paints all the road signs. So he must know the world. Oh, there we go. He must know the world pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like he ought to be mapping as well, as if he's, chronicling all of this area, almost like an explorer.
There you go. So you see, like we just grab it, change it, move it, because Gary might be talking, Kate might say something. Maybe he's been on adventures where he never talks about it because he's humble, right? He's just like, you know, maybe been on many adventures. What's the chat saying?
I'll read one for you. Humble Hedgehog lives in Gratitude Grove and has realized that his secret talent of being a 300 bowler could actually save the grove from the weeds that are taking over from the frowning forest. So I'm down for a bowling hedgehog. That actually sounds like something I might enjoy. That's funny because I was looking at your sign and thinking, where are the areas that hedgehogs would live? Within V World, based on that sign. And Gratitude Grove does sound like a place that Humble Hedgehog might make his home.
He's a bowler.
Gratitude and humility feel like characteristics that are linked very naturally.
And we might try to capture a big idea. So if I'm reading that idea again, let me look at it. Let's see. And Clem House, of course. 300 bowler could actually save the grove from the weeds that are taking over the frowning. Weeds taking over. Because somebody says might actually spark a different idea that becomes the plot of an actual story. So
yeah, I will take this one and run with it to give you an example of what you're describing, DJ. So weeds taking over frowning forest. Is that right? Or were they taking over Gratitude Grove? It doesn't really matter, but the weeds becoming a problem to me, based on just only what we've written so far, I go, okay, how does Humble Hedgehog, how can he help the weed problem? Well, the way he can help it is because he makes these signs and he's traveling all over the place, he could find something that eats weeds or something that deals with weeds, or how do other areas that don't have this weed problem manage those weeds? He's already kind of on the road. It would not be a stretch for him to be the person who finds this exotic solution or finds a solution in a different part of the world that he can then bring back to apply locally.
Okay. And never take credit for it.
Right. Yeah, he would give credit to, whoever he finds at Wandering Pond or Pondering Pond or somewhere, he would give them credit, right? Whoever he finds that can solve this weed problem, he'd be quick to give the credit to, even though he's the character who's actually kind of facilitating and connecting kind of the problem to the problem solver.
Clem just said there's a bowling boa NFT. Is that one of the tokens? Yeah. So that might be something that's up to Gary, because we've taken a couple of those weird NFT tokens and actually made them into side characters. So, we'll put that there, and these things could all mix around, so some things become clear, some things don't. Could he also be on the ball? Be on the ball.
Be the ball. Can he also be the ball? The bowling ball?
Okay. He bowls. He is the ball.
I might worry as he becomes the ball
Yeah.
of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now we might be stepping on someone else's corner a little bit.
Maybe too Sonic. Yeah.
Although, oh man, it's too bad not to be able to use some of that. It would be fun to have that bowling power going through
the screen for a second, just a second, because I have to find the comic strip. I got to switch the screen because sometimes it pops up and it'll show things that, like, even like our titles of our boards could give away stuff. So I don't
things that you haven't blurred out sufficiently.
Yeah. Here, I want to show this one now. This was the daily comic strips, right? So sometimes I just go back and I look for things because I know I had him in here a good bit. He was actually one of the very first comic strip that Gary ideated live, and then I drew like pretty much live, was this one. And I'm trying to figure out when was the first time I did a sign. There he is, just sitting in his house reading Understand Yourself with self-aware hair. If we've done anything at all, like, can I pull that back in? Now, Gary might say like, oh, that's not canon. I don't want to do that. No, this is that. But like, clearly these characters are living in V world, like that kind of thing. I'm not sure when I did the first road signs, but what I'm looking for specifically is February. I think we did where is it? I drew his house. Where is it, man? I'm going to waste time looking for this.
I do love the sign painting angle. My background is in graphic design, and sign painting is sort of an ancestor in some ways of graphic design. So I romanticize the sign painting stuff, and still there are people that keep that alive. There's an underground cartoonist, the late Justin Green, who was a sign painter as like his day job, and he would do a comic strip about sign painting in the back of a trade magazine about sign painting, and eventually collected them into a book collection. And they were fascinating. Some of it was about specific jobs and interesting things that he came across as a sign painter, and some of it was very practical, like as an entrepreneur, just how do you get paid, invoicing, like some of the more monotonous requirements for that type of a job. But it is a fascinating trade, and I would encourage everybody to look it up on Instagram and watch some modern sign painters that paint windows and do that stuff. You can't hardly believe that people can make letter forms like that, just kind of freehand.
Yeah, I found it. He's got a little house. This was the first day of spring comic we did. We were trying to be more topical or whatever, and I had it that he's changing his coat. Like, he literally can take it off and put it back on again. And he walks outside, and it's the third winter, the spring of deception. As we have that a lot in Pennsylvania.
I was going to say that's a Western Pennsylvania staple.
As I was looking at that, I also saw this for before Bad Intentions was Bad Intentions. So someone asked, what does the word canon mean? So canon is something that I kind of introduced during our first summit, where I said, is this real? Because Gary did not concept this. And this was even before he told me that Bad Intentions was the brother of Fearless Fairy, like before comic books. So like, whatever this situation is here, but it is interesting because we can go back to this old comic strip from March 16th, 2024. Each one's dated, so I can kind of see when it was. And there he is. He's trying to get people to go down this rabbit hole. He's trying to talk them into going in, like, hey, get in there. And they're like, no, like, it's really crazy. And actually, she does go down in there. He's like, they never listen, the humans. So this is not canon. Would be considered in the VeeFriends universe. This is considered alpha age. Also, I was tracking my time, Jim. I would like put like that. That one took me 4 hours and 58 minutes. We were very analytical with these comics. You wouldn't believe. But then we would do things like this. And I think this one, like, really, like the fear yard, and like getting through your fear, like finding a way through it. Like, I was just trying to like really expand on like what we could do with the comic strips.
Yeah, that's
where they were
cool.
in newspapers. And I remember Gary just being like through the moon about this one, like when I turned this one in.
I think it's one of the exciting things with the VeeFriends audience being by and large new to comics, it does allow us to do things like that. Whenever I saw Fear, it makes me think of Will Eisner, who the Eisner Awards are named after for anybody unfamiliar with them. And he would do that in the 30s and the 40s with his comics. And they were big lettering that was incorporated into the art. And, here we are 80 years later, and we're able to do that. And it still makes that kind of impression, especially if you're not familiar with it, if you're not somebody who's been reading a lot of comics. A lot of the stuff that we take for granted that's been developed over the last 100 years, we get to apply to VeeFriends. And like Gary, hopefully it will impress the readers whenever they see something that they have not seen before.
Yeah, and we're looking here at this. I was just looking through this as we're jumping around here, and we're to get back to Hedgehog's story thing. But like you can see, the first time I introduced a board was these are all the 13, 12 and a half empathy, optimism, kindness, all the soft skills, right? Or emotional intelligence. And like we actually had this brainstorming board where we could zoom in and give different ideas. Like what for this, these were for the 4-panel comic strips, so we'd actually write 4-panel comic strips just like this. 2 kids pushed by an old man in a store. Andy wrote this one. You could see Andy's signature there. Gracious goose, respectful raccoon. Kids stop to leave the open door for the old man to let him pass through. The old man says, "Why, thank you, best of luck." Not the funniest strip there. That's very straightforward, but mine were always a little bit wacky, May's got some on there. Person looking at the world through a bad lens. The world is so messed up. A VeeFriends hands them a different pair of glasses, like rose-colored glasses. They put them on, and they see the good news only now. And every day you get to decide what you see. There's plenty of good out there too.
That's good. Is that yours?
Yeah, that was mine. And that's based on, I think, I'd hear Gary say something in a social clip. He still says that every time. Like you could choose to look for good news,
Yep.
right?
I love that. It makes me think of Nancy, which is one of my favorite comic strips. And the cartoonist Ernie Bushmiller would do a lot of visual gags. And I could picture something like this, kind of like, switching out the glasses, but also almost changing the drawing style. You could do visual stuff with it that would very clearly illustrate what the words are saying or what the concept is there.
Yeah, you can see I just had like a whole panel. Like these 4 panels were what I was hired to do pretty much. So we would have the existing, like the start of it, they're making an engine that pumps out gratitude. Like these are all story nuggets that could be something, right?
Sure.
So I'm always kind of going back to some of those earlier ideas, like wizard, make me famous. I'm not a genie. Why do you want to be famous, right? And then like the downfall of whatever that, becoming famous is. This one's good. This one actually came from shout out to Cam. I think Cam on our team. He said, I hate the cold. I'm freezing over here. How cold is it where you are? Not bad. Here it's 70 degrees. And he was living somewhere really hot. He's like, how's that possible? You live right where it's snowing. And it's nice and warm here in my living room. I meant outside. So it was like, I'm really warm in my living room. It was like stupid.
Not that different from the glasses idea, right? It's kind of a perspective of, 10 feet out that through the window is, 50-degree difference in temperature.
Yeah. So many on here that didn't get made, but were interesting to look at. So sometimes I go back to that. If he lives in Gratitude Grove, he definitely has a little house. I didn't take a screenshot of that, but it's like a little humble little home. Like a little patch of grass that is piled up.
Yeah, we also would maybe look at this and think like, who's in this world? Who makes sense around him? I was thinking like on one hand, you have humility. What's the opposite of that? Because the opposites often work really well in a story. Confident Cobra maybe is the opposite of humble, or gosh, I don't know. But, like this is the kind of stuff too, where you might start to think about what are the other characters around him in this world, in this story. Who else lives in Gratitude Grove? Like there's a lot of ways that you can approach this to just generate, I don't even know if idea is the right word, but just kind of to start generating threads, because you connect these things. It's again, or ideas are an odd thing to really hunt or catch. I was just reading a book by a comedian. I think it's called The Joke Farm, but it's a guy who has written for like The Daily Show, and he's basically written various comedy television for live television for 20 plus years. And his whole thing was, you need to create a system like this where you're essentially generating ideas, even on days that you don't feel like, in his case, being funny, or you're not maybe connected to the material, or maybe you have stuff going on in your personal life. And it's one of the things with with a brainstorming session like this. It's a lot of like generating threads, and then you can come back to those as you start to find that idea that we're responding to.
Yeah, and then from this, the next step, and this is going to be a very simplified of this method. We might pick things that we're like, okay, we know that could be sounds like maybe a plot. So I'm going to turn those green. That's probably a no. Never takes the credit. That's something, right? He bowls. I like that. He lives in Gratitude Grove. But like, we'll start moving these things up to here. So a hook, an opening, humble hedgehog painting the road signs.
Yeah, you can imagine him coming home from a road trip where he's painting these signs. Again, going back to sign painters who would live out of the trunk of their car with all their toxic paints. And as he returns home, you get to see him then with neighbors. Who knows, maybe with some cool stuff that he's bringing back from these exotic other locations. You can almost quickly describe an entire world around him. And being humble, I imagine that his friends appreciate him. He's probably fun to hang out with. He's got stories of wherever he's just visited, and he's not some blowhard that's telling horrible stories about himself.
But he's not bragging. He's
right.
Not like, but not a braggart. Great. So that's kind of like the opening scene. Then we might have an inciting incident. The inciting incident in this case, based on what we talked about, was the weeds, right?
Yeah, and we could expand that a little bit and think about like, well, how do the weeds become a problem? Maybe one of his neighbors is missing because they've gotten lost in the weeds, or one of the neighbor's kids is missing, and now everybody's kind of searching the becoming a problem overgrown weeds, looking for this lost kid in the.
And you just said that if this was a summit, sometimes Gary will say something, someone will say a quote, and it just pops out like "lost in the weeds." So suddenly that starts to become like a whole, somebody's lost in the weeds.
That's so funny, DJ, because I love it. And it completely did not register to me until you type it and say it.
Yeah. So sometimes even like reading, sharing, we have a couple other people sharing squirrel, cheerful chipmunk. I'll definitely do sharing squirrel. But in this case, I might drop a little alpha and say, well, we can't use cheerful chipmunk because that's going to be in another book. Right.
Tease everybody.
Right. So we'd be like, okay, sharing squirrel might be in the mix. That makes sense. Like maybe sharing squirrel is missing. I don't know. But you see here, like as we're going through this, and we're not going to map out a whole story here. The bowling thing is funny too, like showing his, I don't know if that happened. That's probably not the hook, but like maybe a twist or shift. Like, where does that fit? Like, it's not a rising action. So, like, trying to find the parts that are missing in a storyline, right? Because you need the act two, the middle, the rising action, the second point, the climax. And sometimes it's as easy as we don't even need all that. We could just be like, this could all be it. Like, the setup is he's living in Gratitude Grove, whatever. The middle is someone's lost in the weeds, and then he finds the solution. He finds the character and stops the weeds without taking any credit. And maybe even those that know are telling the story about the humble hedgehog, right? He's like a folk tale. Like it was really him that did it. Kind of like, who else is telling the story about him? It's not really.
Man, it's funny going through this, DJ, because like There's almost enough here that I'm ready to turn this into a
I
real
know,
story.
right?
Chris Clemens 7507 added boisterous beaver, and whenever you're like someone else is telling the story, now I'm ready to have boisterous beaver the one telling the story, and promoting himself heavily as he tells this story.
Like I
But it
provided the
becomes
wood.
really fun in terms of like an unreliable narrator, you know, can further add to the fun of this type of a story if it's somebody telling the story, telling the events, relaying it, because then we can have conflicts between other characters that were there that say, that's not how it went, or possibly even Humble Hedgehog having to kind of speak up, even though he usually doesn't,
Like giving
just to
credit.
set something straight.
Yeah, that
Not
quote
even
was
that he was taking
really,
credit himself, but maybe some part of Boisterous Beaver's story isn't right.
yeah. Yeah, I could see him going like, "Yeah, it was really Sharing Squirrel that did
Right.
all the work. All I did was give the paint," or something like that, or, "I just gave the map. I didn't do any of that. I went bowling."
Yes.
I was bowling at the time. Or bloviated, let's say.
Good word.
Yeah. So that could be what it looks like, right? And then at this stage in the game, if it's something that we really like, and if Chris Fason's there and Kate's there and Allie's there, we're all like, who's gonna do this? Like there's always a story that pops up where all of us want to work on it, right? I think there's quite a few like that where I wish like, man, I wish I could draw them all.
Right.
Um, but
Yeah, it's a bummer. There's probably, for every story I have time to draw, there's probably 4 or 5 that we talk about where
yeah.
I'm like, oh man, that'd be a good one.
So now I'm gonna switch to Driven Dragon here, and you can see how that played out. It kind of played out into an epic race is happening. Now this one changed a little bit because Kate wrote the script, but a flashback scene. We go all the way through, but that's a story for another time. And then Cobra, I feel like Cobra, you really went to town on actually. You really thought about why we're telling this story, like just to give yourself a sense of the whys, the
You
who's.
want to understand this stuff as much as you possibly can. And it's one of the frustrating things for me for making comics is when I really know the characters and the story is whenever I'm wrapping up the last page. So you have to figure out like how much of this can I access before page 1 as opposed to after page 22 whenever you know it all. And I think having these kind of questions, having a session with other creators, I think these are all ways of just looking at a story or looking at a character from as many angles as you can so that hopefully you can grab the best details, you can make the best story possible. But it's really a matter of like, can you get a 20,000-foot view of this thing? And then, okay, now let's go off and edit that into a 22-page comic book story. And it is challenging. We often, a lot of these boards, they're not at this finished written stage. They're at sort of that brainstorm stage where it's like we've got all these ideas. And this happens at the offsite also, is we'll get to a point in story development where someone will go, okay, I can write that. Like we've laid it out in a way that I understand a beginning, middle, and end. I understand this character's arc. We have what we need. And if nobody else has anything to add at that point, that's usually then turn that board green, move it to the ready for a writer, and let's move on to the next character or the next story that we're working on.
Yeah. I'm just kind of scrolling through yours, reading these. This is fun especially how, then, before the artwork's even done, I think, Jim went in and actually wrote the script out in each side of these and maybe even did the layouts, right? Like we've shown this process before, but
Right.
you get all that going on, but all those note cards of like your scene is on the left. When you're writing for yourself, it's a little bit different because like you kind of know, how you see it. I'd say I put Minakawa on here too to show that one. Um, as far as like you did the same thing with, showing some reference to Jeremy. Um, the main scene was kind of moved over to the left before you wrote it. And I think it also gives the artist that's working on it some context as far as like, oh, this is what he means, or this is the look he's going for, or the newspaper headlines, or and then we just keep hammering away at this until his sketches are underneath there. Rare Robot's a good example too, because I think mine was pretty scattered, and I was drawing this myself, so I don't think I put the full script in. I just knew. Hold on a second. Of course, I gotta.
Yeah, and I'll speak to this too. The if you're drawing it yourself, a lot of cartoonists will work this way where they don't have a full script. They're sort of writing and drawing it simultaneously on the page. I'm an advocate for that. It's not something I do very much because I don't really it takes a certain degree of confidence to do that. Um, but it does allow for sort of an organic, you're almost writing it in the comics art form
Yeah,
as opposed to writing a script and then drawing it, which is, a little bit more of a traditional scripting prose method with an illustration uh, component. And I think it's best if you're doing the comics as much together as possible because the artwork will change the script and what the script needs and vice versa.
yeah. Looking at that, I was going to show. What else was I going to show? Well, either way, that's kind of the demo for how this would go. Now, one of the cool things about working with Gary is we might be in the middle of doing this one, and then suddenly he'll just be like, "Oh no, you know what? I want to work on Sharing Squirrel," and then boom, we just jump to another board and we start filling that one out. For Sharing Squirrel, like what is it about her? Like, and then we just start doing the same thing because he might have something that we said in that brainstorm kick off a whole other story that has nothing to do with Humble Hedgehog or anyone else. And that's why, I think that's that process when you're in it, each one could take maybe half an hour, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes even shorter. I think there was ones that just came out of the blue where Gary's like, I got this one. This is it. Boom, boom, boom. Beginning, middle, end. And then he trusts us to work out the details. And that's how we're able to produce so many at once. I had that question when I said something about someone asked how many things did you come up with, and I'm like, I think we did like 20. And they're like, how is that possible? And I'm like, well, it's not like fully cooked.
Right.
It's just enough to give the writers and the artists a good kickoff point.
And we can't see it here with things blurred, but I know there's at least one that we are moving forward with. But the note is, we'll talk to Gary once we get the plot sort of laid out.
Right.
So like each of these is a little bit different as well. Some of them we have the plot, that's not a necessary review. But another one, we kind of have this concept that we like. We have the characters, we have an idea of what they're doing, but it's still a little bit different than what we've done so far. And so I remember that note going into the Miro board of like, well, here's how we can move forward with this idea that's kind of there, but also maybe not 100% clear. So each one is a little bit different. And I think that's fairly typical too. Probably my favorite cartoonist is Dan Clowes. And if you look at stuff that he's done things like Ghost World that was, adapted into a film that he wrote the script for, but he's done a variety of different stories. And in his interviews, he talks about his creative process and how it varies a lot from story to story. And I think that's pretty normal. I think that, we're not trying to have a formula here. So inevitably the processes are going to vary from book to book and story to story.
Yeah. And I do kind of feel like that's the brainstorming method, the brainstorm. As those things are on that project board, like we just showed, then we're also already thinking about things for now, even further down the line. Like we're talking 7 months down the line, we're trying to think of who's a good cover artist for this book. So we're reaching out to cover artists, like all this stuff. We might actually hire an editor. I think that's kind of greenlit. I think we're going to do that. And if you're a creator out there, I get asked this all the time. We do have this talent search form. You can fill it out. I would just say follow the instructions. Just follow the instructions. If you can't follow the simple instructions of filling this out, basically what it is like, what's your rate? You should know all these things. If you don't know all these things, you're probably not ready to work for us. But if you know your rate, you know that what's your first favorite five, or what is your favorite 5 pages that you've ever drawn, right? If you've never done that, then you're not ready to do a 22-page comic book or even, maybe some cover work, but we're looking for a higher caliber of cover artists, like people that have been around, exciting. But we definitely take new people as well. Like,
By the way, shout out Jeremy Hyler, the artist of Minakawa, is in their chat right
oh, hey,
now.
yeah,
And I believe he came through the talent search portal. I knew of his work because I had picked up a couple of his comics before,
yep,
but I do believe he followed that talent search. And that's kind of how we were looking at his work whenever we hired him for Minakawa.
yeah. And for anyone listening to this and thinking like, how do I work for VeeFriends or even do whatever? When you do fill that out, what it does is it'll populate a bunch of information about yourself, what's your turnaround time, all this stuff, but also a folder that allows us to zoom out and see the different styles that are in there. Because something that we've just brainstormed might pop. Oh, we need a cute style. Oh, this guy, and then we'll do an outreach and we'll hire for that job. But our main point is the deadlines, the production. It's not easy. It's definitely not an easy. It might be easy for some of us that have been doing this for 30 years, but
It doesn't get easier.
it doesn't get easier now.
I
So
remember the first comic I ever made, and I thought, oh, this didn't take too long, and I'm going to get faster as I go along. And that is not what has happened.
yeah,
You become more aware of all of the nuances, all the elements of making a good image, a good panel, a good page, a good story. To me, it just is adding more plates that you're spinning, as opposed to like, no, I've mastered this. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm good. I'm fast. I don't know how Chris Faison does it because he is good and fast, but personally speaking, I feel like, the more I make comics, the more I learn about things I need to worry about when making comics. So it doesn't get easier or faster, but hopefully the work gets better for the readers.
I switched my screen here just to show. I'm not going to show what he's done for us, but I'll just show you an example of at Chicago Comic-Con, Ricardo Gonzalez, who's pretty new to comic books. Like he's done his own stuff, but am I sharing it now?
Not yet.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Ricardo brought up his portfolio to show, and I mean, clearly, I knew immediately. I was looking at Ghostbusters. I'm like, man, his pencils are really tight for an inker. Like he was also inking and coloring his own work. His Ghostbuster stuff looked good. His Mario stuff looked fantastic, like Mario the movie stuff. And at that specific time, I was like, wait a minute. I've got 3 books that I think this guy could draw. You know what I mean? And I think the question comes down to like, are you ready to go? Are you ready to rock and roll? So like, and if you follow Gary, if you follow any of this, that's really what it comes down to, is just to stay ready. And what's the best way to stay ready, Jim, to make comics?
It's to make your own comics. Like, you don't need us to give you a green light to make comics. If you want to make comics, make comics. And, if you want to do other stuff with them, if you want to work for other publishers or do work for hire, then you can use those comics to both build your audience, build your skill set, and get in front of an editor or a publisher or somebody who is able to hire you to do what you want to do. But make those comics now. Like, there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah.
I used to teach I taught at SVA, and week 1, I would try to get to know, the students, and I would have them basically describe their dream project. And I bet 80% of the time, the dream project, I would read about it or we would talk about it. And I would think like, you could actually do this now. It's not, I want to be the director of the next Star Wars movie. That one's going to take a little bit more of a path. But a lot of times it was people that wanted to make, to tell their own stories and often to do it in comic book format. And there's not a lot of barrier to entry there. It's not a lot of overhead to be able to afford to make comics. And quite honestly, if you tell me you want to make comics and you're not making comics, I probably don't believe you.
Yeah. Yeah, I have this is a big, I get DMs every day almost, at least a few times a week at least, from people saying like, hey, I want to work with you guys. I want to like draw some comics. And I'm like, what have you done? Like, show me your stuff. I'm excited. And then they're like, well, I've never done it before, but I can figure it out. And I'm like, this ain't that, like this is not that, especially when I'm like, hey, guess what? There's a deadline and our deadlines are pretty tight, so
Yeah, they're for real.
So definitely like And you know, we want to make sure that like it's fun. We don't want anybody burning out doing this or feeling like, man,
You
um,
know, I have been thinking though about that, and whether there are ways to. My neighbor just got into Dogman, and I don't
yeah,
know if you've spent any time with
yeah,
Dogman DJ,
yep,
but some of them have kind of like drawing tips in the back, like how to draw this character or
yeah,
that character, and they sort of encourage at least some of their audience to, hey, go ahead and draw these characters, make a comic yourself, that kind of stuff. And I wonder about us doing more of that, because I was a big Image Comics fan when Image started. And what they would do in their letters pages in the back of the book was have fan art,
yeah,
and I wonder about the fan art that's out there for VeeFriends, and seeing more of that. So I do think there's a lot of ways you can participate, and it's awesome if you look at our comics and think, I want to do that, but you don't make comics. You can start drawing, start drawing. Like it doesn't have to be a professional full-time gig to make comics or to make cool, cool art or whatever. So I would like to see more of that stuff, and it might be something that maybe we look to add whenever we have that extra page or so in the back of the book.
yeah. Fan art gallery would be amazing, and that would be such a good. You know, we do have some filler pages or back matter that we need to fill up every month, and um, that'd be a good thing. Um, yeah, the deadlines don't quit. That's why I'm actually working on this while we're talking a little bit here. Um,
That's a great image.
can't say what it's for, but you know, I can't say when it's coming out. But maybe you can kind of, maybe it's like a New Year's comic. I don't know.
A lot of hints there, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, it was such a good. I can't wait to do it the next time. I feel like we're getting these comic summits down. Like we only did it in 2 days, but then we walked away like, oof, that's a lot. Like so much. Like within, I think everyone we kind of just naturally know when we're done too, where we're like, wow, we've got a lot. This is a good bit. We feel satisfied. Gary feels satisfied. Um, and then it's just back to the drawing board, to start getting things done. Couple minutes. Anybody have any questions in the chat? I'm gonna look through, make sure we didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and you're right, DJ, about sort of its time, because whenever I had come to an offsite previously, I actually left the day before it ended.
Yeah,
Schedule wise, that's all I had. But this time I was there for both days, and I know by the time we left after day two, I don't know how productive I would have been for a day three. It was it's
yeah,
intense, but I don't know. I like those kinds of things. I mentioned that it followed on the heels of Heroes, and it's the same kind of experience where, you're talking to a lot of different people about a lot of different topics. And after a couple of days of really concentrating, um, it's good to sort of go home and just try to relax and let your brain sort it out.
yeah. That's what I did the day after. Just got right into like, okay, schedule, who's doing what does it look like? How are we going to actually make these things happen? Because ideas, like you said, Jim, and Gary will say this too, like ideas are a dime a dozen. Like anybody can come up with a bunch of ideas. It's the execution that really matters on this end.
Right.
And kudos to all the comics team, everybody. We're growing, from all of our cover artists to everybody working on, special projects right now. It's pretty amazing to see all that coming together, and to the fans who support it, because honestly, I can't believe that the books are selling out. Not on launch because there's like 10,000 of them now and more. But it's amazing to watch people breaking them and having a good time collecting them, trading them. Really, there's quite a few collectors that are just like, I'm keeping these forever. Like these are their first comics, Jim, and like that's exciting that we talked about that before, when these comics are like their first comic books that they've ever collected. That's a powerful
It's interesting at
thing.
Heroes, that's a show that's been around since I think 82 or 83. So it's an old school comic book show. And I had a number of VeeFriends collectors come up to me at the show. We were talking about the show a couple of weeks in advance. So hopefully people in that area were aware of it. But several VeeFriends collectors came to me at the show, and it was their first comic book convention. So
Mm,
they would show up and have some books that they wanted signed, we talk a little bit. And then they would ask the advice of like, what do I do here? What should I,
yeah,
make sure I see, or who should I go see or whatever. And it's fascinating to see that part of it too. Sort of like new people coming into comics and being interested in comics, you know. So that was really exciting to me to have some of those conversations with some first time attendees at Heroes Con. And actually, one of my friends, Matthew Sardo, who does a comic book show called IC3, the Independent Comics Creator Con, he did a thing on Friday where he met up with a group of people. He had printed up little programs of like 10 artists, and he basically was like a guide walking this small group through a very big artist alley at Heroes Con.
Yeah, that's cool.
With stop offs at, you know, several of these different artists. And I thought, man, that's a really cool idea. And I could see shows doing more of that, because it's true. If you're new, Heroes is in the Charlotte Convention Center, the entire convention center. It's a massive, massive space. If you're new to that, where do you start?
Yeah.
You know, so having, you know, I could see shows doing more of this where it'd be like, yeah, you know, meet up on the hours, we'll walk around, show off, whatever. They could even be themed at a show of that size. I could see New York Comic Con, San Diego, any of these big shows offering that type of a thing for anybody, whether you're new to comics or just looking to, you know, give me the indie creator tour, give me, you know, the golden age tour or whatever.
Yeah. I love the guided tour idea. I think that's brilliant. I know I probably would even do something like that, even though I know, you know, like, because it is overwhelming as a creator, even going there and being like, how do I find so and so, or like, what am I really looking for?
I miss so many people at those shows. You know, I'm as guilty of it as anybody, because there is so much going on. So it's fun. I just like seeing new ideas show up. And, you know, the idea of a guide who's going to help people through the show, I haven't seen that before. I love it. And I mean, look, it goes back to VeeFriends too, right? We're doing a lot of stuff here that's not what I've seen before. That's very appealing to me. And if you want to make new fans, I think that's what you've got to do, right? Like, we have a system in place that's really kind of been functioning the same way since the mid 80s, maybe before that a little bit. New ideas are the way to go if you want to bring new people into anything.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time for us, because not only are we bringing new people in, but over on the comic book side, people are learning more about Gary and learning more about VeeFriends. And like, I could see a lot more respected names like talking to us and saying like, we're already having talks with a lot of people where it's like, hey, how do I get involved in this? This sounds cool what you guys are doing. And Gary's like, they can't even believe that Gary's even, you know, wasting his time with comic books. But he's like, Gary's telling them like, I'm all in. I want to keep doing that. I want to do this full time. You know, I think if Gary in another world could do this every day, you know, he would. So you never know what the future holds. That's about it. I got any other questions? I don't see anything there. So thanks again for joining us. We'll try to do this again next week, maybe. Depends. I think I might. Yeah, we'll do it.
July has a lot going on, but I do think we'll get at least one more weekend before schedules start to get weird again because of San Diego National. There's a lot happening in July around VeeFriends, so our schedule may be a little bit up in the air, but I do think next week we can make it again next week at Thursday if that works, DJ.
And if you are thinking about going to New York Comic Con, or you know, you've been on the fence, I would say get yourself to New York Comic Con. We got some big things being planned right now, super big things.
Yeah, the most ambitious and challenging project in VeeFriends history, at least as long as I've been here, is currently on the table. So I have my fingers crossed that it's going to happen for New York Comic Con. But it's one of those projects that, man, talk about the biggest challenge, but also kind of a dream project. So yes, there should be some exciting stuff for New York Comic Con.
Yeah,
is putting it mildly.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I think that's it. This has been fun.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Take some time and just talk about comics and hang out with you, Jim. But we got comics to make.
We do.
We got to go.
Bye, everybody.
We'll see you soon, guys.